GTD Connect members. It's Kelly Forrister. I'm so happy to be on the line today. We have a great webinar for you. I'm joined by Meg Edwards, my fellow coach in Maine. Hi, Hey, Meg.
Hi, Kelly. Hey, everybody. So glad to be here again.
And Meg and I were laughing about this one because we did quite a bit of prep for it, and we realized we actually have both learned something in prepping for this one. So many of you know both of us, and we've been around the block for quite a while with GTD. So it's always kind of fun, and we go, like that's a new way to think of it. So it's been actually quite a fun process for us and enlightening for us to figure out how to share this with you guys, but really look and see what are all the ways to review things in your system. What should we be reviewing when? So I think I certainly went into this in the prep thinking it was one thing, and we came out and we're going to give you something much deeper and richer than I expected. So, it's been a pretty fun journey here. Let's start off and just cover quickly the logistics. I know many of you know this. You've been on the line. Thank you for that, by the way. These webinars are just a pleasure for us to do for you. And just a review, you can shoot an email to our team at webinars@davidco if you need assistance. And then we're going to interact with you quite a bit during this one in the questions box. So please don't hesitate to put your questions there. We will do our best to answer them throughout. We expect to go about an hour, maybe a little less, but won't be longer than an hour. And we are looking to answer as many questions in this one. I know some don't, we can't afford to spend too much time on questions. This one we actually do want to hear from you at all the different levels we're going to talk about around review. So with that said, let's dive right in. So the part that was kind of an epiphany for me, and Meg, I'll have you share your own experience here as we were developing this. We started to tackle reviewing in the classic way that we look at reviewing in GTD. Really, what are you maintaining? And I created this whole slide deck, and we were going back and forth, and realized, we're kind of doing it around this whole maintenance mode. So maintaining is certainly a big part of reviewing, but Meg and I both started to scratch our heads and say, but that's really doesn't cover all of it. There are also two other critical components to review if you think about it. There's going to be reflecting time. So your weekly review, for example, is maintaining time, but it's also reflecting time. There's time where you're stepping back. So you're going to clean up. Let's call maintaining cleaning up, looking at your list, really getting in there, pulling up your sleeves and getting everything squeaky clean, mapping your projects to your next actions, looking ahead on your calendar, the real tactical stuff. But there's reflecting time, kind of looking, saying, am I working on the right stuff? How did I spend my time last week? Where did I get yanked around? How can I avoid that in the coming week? That's reflecting. So there was helpful distinction. But then we said, well, really, you're also kind of doing a third one. And these kept bubbling up to the surface.
Right.
So actually, Meg, why don't I flip it over to you to talk about the third one, the executing, and how that came to be.
But then I was like, well, wait a minute, Kelly. There's also about the threefold nature of work, which is, I have to review all my options, decide what I'm going to do. That really isn't maintaining, and that's not really, it is reflecting and it is maintaining in some ways, but it's also, I'm reviewing my systems to execute, to decide what to do. So in the conversation with Kelly, we were like, wait a minute, there are like these three types of review. And then wonderful Kelly had to kind of completely redo the slide deck.
But it's great because it really helps to say, well, how good can this be? Because these webinars are so fantastic because they test us in what we know. I mean, David Allen has always said it's at the end of the Getting Things Done book. If you've never noticed it, one of the best ways to really learn GTD is go try to teach it to somebody. Go share it with a friend. Go share it with a coworker that really you think is swimming and think need this. Go try to teach it, and you're going to see where your own gaps are. So that's what's so great about our roles is we get to see, okay, wow, I'd never really grokked it that way to really look at what all the different types of reviews are. Because a lot of people go, oh, weekly review, that's what review means. And they kind of look at this really tedious process. But they're actually really different ways we're going to review. So what we have lined up for you today is to look at these three different types of reviews, but very specifically and tactfully. We're not going to just stay at the high level here in terms of, oh, what does it mean to reflect and execute? We're going to really drill it down for you, and we're going to go through things like what does it look like for your calendar and your next action list and your weekly review and your someday maybe and projects, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to go through a whole bunch of levels here and then give you a chance, and this is where we'd really love your participation, is to look at where could you shore things up? Where are there gaps in what you're doing to maintain, reflect, and execute around all the different areas? And any next steps you have, certainly always a good practice. Grab those along the way. They're fresher in your mind as you think of them rather than waiting till after the webinar and thinking, what was it I said I should do around that level? So encourage you, please certainly grab it along the way. All right. So before we dive in, it would be helpful to know in the questions box, what is your experience level with GTD? I recognize a few names on the line, so I know you've been around the block with GTD, but if you could just park yourself into one of the three buckets of you're a beginner and getting started, you're familiar and you're really laying your foundation, or you're very experienced and you're looking for fine tuning. Beginner, familiar, or very experienced. Leslie's saying, very excited about getting this next level of detail. Patty's saying minimal. Barb is saying very experienced. I would agree. Leslie, very experienced. I would agree. Charlotte's familiar and looking for gaps. Okay, good. So it's kind of a classic GTD Connect group, mostly steering, a few beginners, but mostly steering towards the familiar and experienced. So that's how we're going to steer it here as well. We're going to understand that you have the basics down at least, and certainly that doesn't mean we're going to ignore you beginners, but we're going to assume you kind of know what the basics are in terms of what is a weekly review. That would mean you're already familiar, you have some familiarity with that kind of concept. So let's start with the very first level here. We wanted to start with calendar and action lists. And Meg, let me flip it over to you for a moment and have you talk about what this level is and what the frequency of when you might tend to look at this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that this is where, when we talk about the horizons of focus, this is the runway level, which includes your calendar and actions lists. And I think that again, the three things to have on your calendar are those, appointments for that day, any have-tos for that day, and any FYIs for that day. And then your actions list, obviously, are going to be those lists that you need to have in order to do your work. And you want to have as many lists and not too many lists. And I think that what is interesting here is we get a lot of the questions about, again, how often do I need to review these and when?
And so, Meg, are you still there?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Can you just give a little detail of how, people often say, should I be looking at this all day long? How often do I look at the calendar? Am I supposed to be looking at every single list every single day? What's some of the frequency around that?
Yeah, I find that, I think most people really kind of do have control over their calendar. I know that I actually had to figure out how often I need to look at my calendar because I've been doing this for so long that I actually can forget. My mind's not holding what I have to have on my calendar. So I have to review my calendar several times a day to just know where I need to be. Oh, yes, I've got this webinar at 1. Or last night I had a 7 o'clock Eastern time call with Julie, and I need to make sure that I'm reviewing my calendar as often as I need to. A funny story is I had a virtual workflow coaching client, I will never forget this, probably like a decade ago, at 8:30 Saturday morning. And I never do that. He was a surgeon. The only time I really could work with him was on a Saturday morning, and I completely missed it. I was mortified. I completely missed it. He drove an hour to his office to be there for the call, and I missed it because I didn't review my calendar Saturday morning. And that was my learning, and I'm sure some of you have also had that kind of experience of, hopefully not always a negative experience of, I now look at my calendar in the evening and in the morning 7 days a week, because sometimes I have those oddball little appointments or those kind of half dues or whatever it is, even on a Saturday and Sunday, and even in the evening I have appointments. So that's kind of the calendar review. So it's kind of like a daily review. And then the next actions list. Now this is really interesting, you guys, about, we get this question a lot, Kelly, and I bet you do too, which is how often I review the actions lists. And I think that, again, it's often as you need to, but sometimes, some people will review their actions lists and figure out how much time they have in the day for maybe doing time, and then they may make a punch list of those things that they want to do, and if they don't get to them, they'll put them back on their actions list at the end of the night so that they're not looking at all of their options all the time when they're going to do. Any
Mhm.
thoughts about that one, Kelly?
Yeah, it's funny because, and I would probably only I'd probably only share this with more the advanced GTDers, because somebody who's brand new to GTDs would say, "What? That sounds so confusing. Like, why are you looking at different lists?" But one of the things I do on many days, especially days that are really packed with a lot of stuff, like yesterday was a really, really busy day for me, I have a stack of index cards. So as all my lists are electronic, my calendar is electronic, but I'll go through and I'll cherry pick things that I want to do today that are absolutely kind of the must do's. So no matter what, as things fly around and emails come in and all this stuff is getting handled, I'm looking at that little index list, and it could include some personal stuff. So an errand I have to do today. Now, yes, that stuff is on my calendar. It's just another safety net to have it in front of my face. And what I do every morning is I look at my calendar. So I always get my inbox to zero and I look at my calendar first. End of day, I do the same thing. I look at my calendar and I'm looking for the all day events to make sure there weren't any missing. If I mean, weren't any that were left undone. If there were, um, I will carry them over to the next day or take that moment right then to do it. Um, and for my all day events, I'll tend to either delete them off the page or I open them up, edit them, and click and write done in all caps next to it. So that's a quick visual for me. But I'm at least looking at my calendar in the morning and end of day. The end of day, I'm also peeking ahead to the next morning. Because, like you, Meg, I don't want to be just surprised, wake up at, start my day at 8 o'clock, sit down at my desk, and realize I had an 8 o'clock meeting or I have something. So I'm always, and I know when I don't do that, I don't sleep as well because I'm nervous that I don't know what's coming the next day. So I will tend to look ahead of my calendar.
Yeah, and I think this gets in then to the maintaining of it, right? So, I really maintain my calendar a lot of times in the weekly review, because in the weekly review there are two steps to the calendar. One is to go back, to the previous calendar data, and one is to go ahead. And periodically, I need to go really far ahead, and I'll schedule time in my calendar just to do a calendar review. Sometimes, I just actually did one about a month ago where I did a June, July, August, and beginning of September calendar review because I have a child and I needed to really just reflect about the summer and successful outcomes. And really, I had to do some maintenance on it. I needed to do really some reflecting about what the successful outcome was for the summer. And then by doing all of the maintaining and reflecting, it allowed me to now just execute,
Hmm.
for this summer. And I don't really have to do any kind of thinking. So that's why, Kelly, I think this is really kind of new even for me to be thinking about, well, what do I need to do to maintain my calendar? What kind of reflecting time do I need so that I can really execute and be in that intuitive decision-making mode when I'm in my calendar? Because I've already done the maintenance and I've already done the reflecting.
Yeah. They're kind of, those three are kind of like the three legs of the stool that keep this level up. They're all three are really needed because there are times I'm just cleaning up, I'm maintaining my calendar, I'm adding new triggers. I do that almost every day. I mean, I'll find something and I'm adding future tickler items to my calendar and future triggers. Um, I'm also reflecting. There are times when I look at my calendar really as a whole, I step back, I'll go maybe into week view and say, wow, I'm packed right there with stuff on my calendar, and really just realizing I'm not going to have enough doing time, and I'll start renegotiating some things where if I don't have that doing time, I know I'm going to be really far behind if I don't have enough processing time. I already can see next week I have a short week. I have 2 days, and one of those I'm working 2 days, and then I'm off on vacation for 3 days. One of those days is a meeting from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So that means I have one day of doing next week. So that's the kind of reflecting I'm doing, to look at my calendar, not just hour by hour slot or even day by day, but week by week, and then even backing it up month by month to really just get some good reflecting time in. So I know I'm going to have my executing time and choose what's the best thing for me to be focusing on, which meetings are the best ones for me to be executing on and going to, that kind of thing. So the other formats of things that might live on this level, so calendar, action lists are certainly all your context list, anything like computer calls, errands, home, office, etc. I don't look at those every day. I look at those as often as I can, but there's some days I'm really fine to not look at my at home list for a couple of days. If I'm not in a mode of cranking through home next actions, I'm really fine with that. You probably have some lists that are really more of your favorites that get your front seat, and I have that with my at computer list. I look at that one more than that, and waiting for I look at the most, as often as I can. So even if I have a packed day, if I had a break in my schedule, I might pop over to the at computer list of any of them, but I'm probably not going to scan all of them on a daily basis.
Nope, I
Weekly,
totally
yeah,
agree.
weekly certainly I would. So wrapping this one up, if you think in terms of those three levels, maintain, or three types of reviews: maintaining, reflecting, executing, do you see any gaps in what you're doing in your own review cycle around those? Is there anything that you say, wow, I don't know that I'm giving myself enough maintaining time on my next actions list or calendar, or enough stepping back and reflecting time or executing time? Is there enough where you're really going in there? And how is your execution on your calendar or your next actions? Do you feel like you just don't have enough time to really go after your next actions, and your calendar's getting all of your attention? Might be just the way it needs to be, but we just want to give you a chance to look at that, see any gaps and any next actions. Certainly, please grab that for yourself, but also capture that in the questions box, please. Okay. And one question while you're doing that is from Leslie. Kelly, how do you feel about putting them on the calendar and then moving back to the action list if you don't do them? Or what about making a category for punch list and putting them on the action list? Um, Sometimes I will have something that I say was started on my next actions list, and then I move it back to calendar. I move it to calendar because it's more timely, or something that started as calendar and moves to next. I'm fine with that. I'm fine to move stuff around as long as it's a conscious choice. What I don't want to get into is becoming a slave to my next actions and the stuff that's on my list. I want to really make sure that um, I'm just careful and conscious about what I'm choosing to do with things, and not, I don't want to spend more time maintaining than it deserves. This is the bottom line on that. So let's see how people are responding to this one. Mark is saying it's a challenge to think differently about review when I'm doing a weekly review. And David is saying I seem to mostly maintain and reflect. Reflecting tends to be negative. I really did not consider executing. Okay. I'm seeing somebody here that they can actually see the questions. That's an interesting feature / bug that's coming back with GoToWebinar. That's interesting. And Susan sharing, I need to be more disciplined and regular about weekly reviews. I do calendar and OmniFocus, but don't go through all the steps. All right, so I think we've wrapped up that level there. Let's pop over to the next one, which is projects. So projects are the multiple step outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Will typically be on your plate. They'll complete within a year, usually within a couple of months is our experience, but within a year certainly. And Meg, let me pop it over to you and respond about how often you look at your projects list and project plans. Let's throw project plans into this as well.
You bet. Generally speaking, it's about weekly, although, again, all this is really depending upon certain times of people's, careers and jobs. Sometimes I'm looking at my project list a lot more frequently than weekly, and sometimes I'm looking at it weekly. So when we give you that kind of time frame, it always is weekly and then as often as you need to.
Hmm.
Um, but generally speaking, when you're doing work, you're doing the next actions to move all your projects forward, because you don't do projects, you do all the next actions. And so generally speaking, it's just about weekly.
Yeah. And all of it, like you said, Meg, is a good point. Or as often as you need to. We're going to give you some guidelines certainly. So calendar and your lists are daily. Projects tends to be weekly. But if you need to look at them less than that or more than that, certainly do that. So my projects list, certainly in my weekly review. I also look at my projects list. We have a team meeting every 2 weeks, and that can happen certainly different on a different day than my weekly review, and they're not part of my weekly review. So I'm reviewing my projects list with my team. That's another time I review it. So you might have some different kind of formats like that. I just actually this morning was looking at my areas of focus. We have a database that lists everybody's areas of focus in the company, all the roles that they hold. And I was actually mapping my projects list to my areas of focus, really from a reflecting point of view. So if we move on to the different types again, I was looking at it from a reflecting point of view, saying, where am I skewed? Are there areas of focus that aren't getting enough attention? And I went through every single area of focus. Not that every area of focus has to have a project, but I went through. So, for example, I have a role called community of practice. And I just, for a moment, paused there and said, do I have any projects around that? And I looked at my projects list. No, that's okay. Doesn't have to be one, but what else am I doing though around to energize that area of focus? And I realized, oh, okay, I just sent the instructors a video that I wanted them to see. That was something that I created and shared, the tickler video of David Allen. So that's part of the community practice. Okay, good. Next area of focus. So that for me was my reflecting time as I was reviewing and I was maintaining my areas of focus. Are they current? I was maintaining my projects list as a current. That slipped me into the reflecting mode. And then that actually triggered a next action on something for me where I realized there was another project for another role that I hadn't, area of focus that I hadn't identified that I wanted to create as a new project. So I kind of slipped into those and then captured a next action on that. So, um,
Yeah, and Kelly, I think, one thing that I want everybody to kind of reflect upon is, do you guys all have a complete project list?
yep.
Because if it's not complete, then it's really hard to do the next maintaining, reflecting, and executing. So in terms of a gap, hopefully all of you have a 100% complete personal and professional project list. And if not, then that may be a gap for you to be able to get that and to carve out some time to, like how Kelly did. One beautiful way of getting a complete project list is to bump up to your areas of focus and responsibilities and see if you now have some projects that might have gotten missed.
Mm-hmm.
I think then once you have that complete, then that's where the maintenance comes in. How do you maintain a complete project list? Now, that's what I love about the weekly review is that, as Kelly was saying, I don't want to be spending all my time maintaining 24/7. Life moves really fast. And even David sometimes says that he's grabbed an action and may not have grabbed the project at the same time, but he'll get it in the weekly review. So I think that's what's so critical about that review, particularly that weekly review, that's so much on the runway and the project level. So then how do you maintain that? And then in the weekly review, you're reflecting on the outcome of these. And one of the things that I'm always asking myself when I'm looking at my project list is, when I'm in reflecting mode, is what do I need to do to get this project off of my mind? And sometimes, for me, Kelly, that's what pushes me into project plans.
Mm.
If the project's on cruise control, I just naturally go into project planning whenever I need to. But sometimes it's not off of my mind, and I need to do some more thinking, so that then again I'm executing the next actions to be able to finish these projects.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Meg, because I think a lot of people, two thoughts. A lot of people dread the reviewing, especially the weekly review, because they think of it all around maintain. And there's so much of it around reflecting. So, for example, with projects and project plans, one of the steps of the weekly review, as you know, is review your project plans. Well, I can't say I review my project plans. I have some massive project notes and databases and things. I'm not reviewing those unless the project isn't on cruise control. So I'm not going through every week and going through all my notes. I think people fear that with the
I
weekly
agree.
review.
I
They think,
agree.
oh, what does that mean going through all that and all those spreadsheets? No. Is the project on cruise control? That's my question. And then is it captured? Is it off my mind? So on cruise control means off my mind. And actually the essay that's coming out should be today on David Allen's latest productive living newsletter is all around capturing your projects and getting a complete projects list. Because I would agree, Meg, that is really,
Oh, cool.
yeah, it's actually very timely because it's all the focus of David's essay of it meaning, my kid is happy in their next level of school, to parents, elderly care, to the really obvious stuff, and really capturing that and looking for the verbs. What are things that you need to maintain to until it's on cruise control, to um, resolve, to set up, to complete, etc. So maybe you have a next action to get a complete projects list. Is there anything that's multiple action that has an outcome you're working on that you haven't tracked somewhere? I guarantee your mind is trying to track it for you. So I'd
Yeah,
encourage you.
two more points. One is that when I am reflecting on the weekly review, sometimes I'll look at my project list and it just is like, wow, I need to do its own review. And so sometimes I'll do just a project review outside of the weekly review. I don't always try to put so much pressure on that for weekly review.
Yeah.
And just like I'll do a calendar review outside of the weekly review. A lot of times I just will pull anything off of that weekly review and do its own review because I need more time because it can't be done just in that weekly review that's about an hour and a half.
Hmm.
And 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 I really like the word I need to reflect. And sometimes I'll like then just pull out one project and say, wow, I'm not really in control of this project. It's really on my mind here. So what do I need to do to get off of my mind? And I'll just do work on that one project and maybe do some real project planning or go through the natural planning model to get it off of my mind. Again, it's like paying attention to that maintenance and that reflecting, because if I do that, it's a heck of a lot easier executing.
Yep.
And I think that in order to execute, you have to do a maintenance piece and a reflecting piece, is really what Kelly and I were kind of figuring out as we were creating this.
Yeah. Yeah. And don't forget that doing or drafting a project plan or updating the project plan can be your next action. You don't have to have the entire project figured out of outcome, next action, and everything in between in order to move forward. Capturing a next action called do project plan for project such and such is a very legal, legitimate next action. There are oftentimes I do that, and there are many times too where this came up in some forum discussion. Do you ever capture a next action without the project? Absolutely. There are times when I want at least one. I'm looking for the safety net. So at least if I have it, at least as a next action, or sometimes I only capture the project and I know my weekly review, one of these review times, I'm going to capture it and make sure that the project then has a next action. At least if I have one, either an outcome or the next action somewhere, I'm good. I know that I trust the review process will pick up and fill in the gaps of what else needs to get captured around that. So I don't hold back in getting it into my system one way or another. It'll be tracked as it needs to get tracked by the end of the day.
Eric is asking about, I keep using the word executing, and is it the same of doing? It is. So when we talk about the 5 phases of workflow, collect, process, organize, review, and do, yes, that means executing.
Yep. And
I'm going to look at all my options to execute.
Yeah, I almost put the word doing there, but I didn't. Sometimes people get confused that doing isn't maintaining a form of doing, sort of, but doing, we wanted to be executing is you're choosing to execute on the next action. You're choosing to take action, move forward, get this thing going. So, but yeah, absolutely, it means the same thing. And Larea, let's just take one question before we move off this level. Larea is asking, do you have any special set of questions or thought process when you reflect on your project, such as how's this going? Should I be doing it, etc.? That's a good one. Meg, any comments on that?
Well, she was saying that she liked what I just said about what do I need to do to get this off of my
Oh,
mind.
okay. All right, good. I didn't read
You
further.
know, I'm always really saying, first of all, if I have a project, it's in alignment with my areas of focus and responsibilities and goals and vision and purpose. So, because I can take on projects and get out of alignment, and or it's no longer relevant. Is this project still relevant? You know, I had a project that I took off about 2 weeks ago because it's no longer relevant. I went to a meeting, and after the meeting, all of a sudden I didn't have this project anymore, so it wasn't relevant anymore. So I have to think about what the outcome is, what the successful outcome is. Is it in alignment with my job description personally and professionally, and is it in alignment with goals, vision, and purpose if need be? And but I think for me, after all these years, I really am saying, does it attract me? Does that project attract me? Now, sometimes I have to do projects just because I have to
I
do
know. I
them,
was I
right?
was gonna say,
I
Meg, I
got I
have
got to
a.
do I got to do my taxes, well, because I don't want to go to jail, so that attracts me not to go to jail, and
Yeah,
I got to
actually.
do my project.
Right.
But generally speaking, you know, those are kind of the things that I have to do. But at the end of the day, when I grab the project and grab the next action, I have to tell you guys, I take a pause and I say to myself, can I move on to something else now? Because if it's still nagging at me, I need to do more thinking. And it may be a variety of things of what the more thinking has to do. It means I didn't quite grab the successful outcome. It means that I didn't really have the next action. So this is the thinking. This is knowledge working thinking that we have to do on projects. So hopefully some of that will help you, you know, land on making sure you got a complete project list.
And one other thought, I would set of questions you can ask that I know I do for all of mine is, what's the value in getting this done? What's the risk if I don't?
Oh, right, right, right. I love
I'm
that.
really often asking that. I have one that's sort of my role, but sort of someone else's role, and sort of someone else can do it. But I have an interest in doing it in this project, so I took it on for the team. And there's value because I'd really like it to get resolved. And the risk is, okay, well, if I don't do it, it probably won't get done. I don't mean that in an ego way. It's just, it's not, nobody else really cares about this thing as much as I do. So I decided to take it on because it's got value for me. So I'm constantly weighing that value risk thing. Even with the ones that are very directly part of my roles, I'm really looking and saying, does that still need to be done, even though it's part of my role? Can it be incubated? I'd say I'm often looking for ways to incubate stuff to not flood my plate with everything that could be done. I'm really looking at that value risk proposition. All right, let's pop over to someday maybe. We're doing this as a separate, um, I'll say level. It's not really a level, but it's really a separate area here because someday maybe isn't really necessarily reflected in, it's reflected in the weekly review, but it's not reflected in horizons of focus necessarily. People don't quite know. They either want to lump someday maybe under projects or under next actions, and it's not really either. It could be a combination of those. So someday maybe, I would say, deserves, as one of my favorite lists, deserves its own discussion here. So kind of, I picked this picture here of just this was me in a canoe in British Columbia. Someday maybe, where would you like to visit? Would you like to visit this gorgeous lake here? It's in Lake Louise in British Columbia. So kind of the someday maybes. How often do you look at those? So Meg, what would you say about that?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is I think this is still the most underutilized category and misunderstood because I think that a lot of people think that the someday maybe, and I think when I was even looking at the Getting Things Done book and reading David's examples of someday maybes, it really was someday maybe I want to go travel here, or someday maybe I'd like to, you know, learn how to fly, you know, and I think someday maybe is a lot more than that. This is someday maybe's websites I want to visit, someday maybe books I want to read, someday maybe movies I want to watch, you know, someday maybe, you know, ideas that I have for marketing ideas. So you could have marketing ideas as a someday maybe list. And I think that the first thing that I think is important is to separate what are you committed to working on? What do you have the bandwidth and resources to work on? And then what do you want to track? And then what list do you want to? And then how frequently do you want to? And I think on another webinar, I gave an example of a client, and I'll give it again because I think it's relevant, of um, I was coaching him over several months, probably like 6 months. And we didn't know how to organize his someday maybe list. And so he just kept building it. He just had one honker someday maybe list. And he built it, and he just got bigger and bigger. And there was 100, then 200, then 300. And the next thing there was like 700 things on this list. And I was coaching him, and I kept on saying, I still don't know what to do with it. And one day he had that kind of aha moment where he said, you know what? I now know that I want to review these weekly in my weekly review, these monthly, these quarterly, and these yearly. And he actually divided his someday maybe list up by time frame. Now, some people, I do recommend, though, that you do have an incubation list, and I use the word someday maybe and incubation kind of interchangeably, that you do have a list that you want to look at kind of weekly in the weekly review. So that when you get to that someday maybe list part of the weekly review, you're seeing a specific list. This guy, there's no way that he was able to get through 700 someday maybes in the weekly review. So have a someday maybe list that you do want to look at weekly. And then if you want to, have them by time frame or by topic. So I had another gentleman who had about 200 marketing ideas. And he didn't review those weekly. He just reviewed those as often as he needed to when he needed to think about marketing. So there really wasn't even a time frame for him. It was just an incubation list of all these great marketing ideas. So, you know, hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavor of the someday maybe list, but you do have to maintain it. It can't just be this dumping ground, I find, because it has a piece of you. So I think that there's a maintenance piece to the someday maybe. How often do you need to clean it up? I think that there's a reflecting piece if there are things that you want to move off of those someday maybe lists and now make it active. And I don't know so much about, like, you know, executing, because I think the executing part of your someday maybe list is actually taking it off, putting it on your list, so now you can actually do it.
Mm-hmm. I like that thing you just said, Meg. It's got a piece of you. It's not just a dumping ground, because I used to load up my someday maybe lists as well, and I have a variety of different lists. I have one just for GTD Connect. So anytime you guys mention stuff in the forums or you email me, hey Kelly, I want this webinar topic, I'm capturing all of that in someday maybe for specific for GTD Connect. And I look at that one more frequently than any of them. I also have, on the flip side, something like someday maybe places to go. I don't look at that very often at all. Really, I'm not scanning it saying, oh, that's right, we want to go to Machu Picchu. What can we do to make this happen soon? I'm not doing that for that kind of list. I'm looking at it much less frequently, and really only when we say, let's take a big trip, where should we go? And then I'm scanning that list. So the frequency is actually a really good tip. Even though someday maybe is generally on the weekly review checklist, I can't say I do that. I don't even look at the Connect one weekly, because if I have a new webinar, I'm going to that list to say, what have they been asking for? Or if we have some IT time, I'll say, all right, great, what project can I get them to start to work on? Something like that. So it depends. And I would say probably I look at that one maybe once a month. And I don't let them go too stale. And I also, to the point of they have a piece of you. Some of my personal ones had gotten so big that they felt off track to me. They felt really like I was hoarding someday maybe items. And it's the best way I can describe it, because I just went, why am I collecting all this? Does this really even have value for me? What's the risk if I let this stuff go? And I ended up whittling it down, and I actually felt this relief inside of me. Even though I don't have any obligation to do it, some part of me still felt like, well, it's on the list, and it just felt like hoarding. That's the best way I can describe it, this kind of hoarding energy. And I let a bunch of them go, and I actually said, if it's important enough, it will come back around again. And a lot of them didn't. A lot of them really didn't. They were like, things to buy, and I don't know, just a whole bunch of stuff like that. So if that helps, let's flip over to any gaps or next actions for you around someday maybe. Can you see any improvements for yourself around someday maybe? And please capture that in the questions box. And Gregory's saying, what about by areas of focus? Yeah, absolutely. So for me, Gregory, GTD Connect is a big area of my focus. I'm the curriculum development person for Connect. So that is, I do sort it by areas of focus, at least that one.
And Susan asks about whether you can have an on hold for a project could be a way of handling someday, maybe. You bet. You could have, these are all my projects that I have on hold, and then you review those as often as you need to, so that you have a current project list, you have a projects on hold list, and then you can have an incubation list.
Yep.
So you bet.
Yeah, I found that too. When I would put projects that I would say, oh, not right now, but I really, this is going to come soon or really should get done soon, but not current project. I didn't feel comfortable putting it on someday maybe because I do look at those as longer term and really no attachment to doing. So I also use a projects on hold list and it really seems to help. Eric is sharing, maybe like David Allen, I'm a kid at an all you can eat buffet and I'm attracted to more than I can possibly do. This stuff goes on my someday maybe list. Like Meg's example, it's a huge list now. I've subcategorized it, but still more of a dumping ground than a meaningful list. So, any next action for you around that, Eric? Does that match how you want it to be? It's okay. I mean, if you're happy with that many items, you might find it's just okay. Or do you have a next action to change it in any way? Um, She's saying it's particularly just stuff I encounter online for things I'd like to read, review, research, learn more about. Yeah, okay. So you might find there's some culling there to do. You might find some of that stuff is has grown moldy or is outdated. I notice for me, if I see an article on the web, it's no longer relevant if I leave it on there too long. So I don't tend to put that kind of stuff unless it's like a video I might watch that, maybe a TEDx video, but even that has a shelf life. So you might find some shorter term ways to handle some of that stuff, like a newsstand, and say, if I haven't read this magazine or this article or watched this video by this certain day, it goes away. All right, let's move on to areas of focus. I picked this picture of Dave because I don't know if many of you know this, but David Allen loves hats, or at least he seems to. He often shows up in a hat, in different hats. He's just got all these different crazy, wonderful, fun hats. And so this is one of my favorites of David. He was on his bike and had his little cap there. So your areas of focus are very much like the hats you wear. So how often should you be looking at those? What would you say about that, Meg?
Well, I think, generally speaking, our recommendation has been about once a month. And that's an opportunity. And that being said, how often do you need to possibly look at performance reviews or monthly personal check-ins? And sometimes it just happens when life changes and it requires reassessments on your responsibilities. So again, about once a month, as often as you need to. I actually have a tickler in my calendar at the beginning of every month to schedule about anywhere from a half hour to 45 minutes to review my areas of focus, just because I need to do the maintenance of it, and I need to have some reflecting time on it. So I remember in the beginning when I first created my areas of focus list, I would go months and months and months without reviewing it. I actually forgot I even had it because I was so just paying attention to actions and projects that I needed to actually have a reminder in the calendar. Now I've been doing this for so long, I just intuitively review it as often as I need to. I
Yeah.
love this level, the areas of focus level. We call it the 20,000-foot level because it's the bridge level to go up and down the horizons of focus. It's what creates your projects and actions, and it also is what also creates your goals and vision and purpose. So for me, I got to tell you guys, and I'm just outing myself, for me, this is the most critical level for me to maintain because that's how I go up and down the horizons of focus. That may not be the case for a lot of people. I'm just letting you know, for me, this is where I always make sure that I am really, really clear and current. Because for me, it impacts all the other levels.
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. This one, whenever people in seminars say, "Oh, Kelly, how do I prioritize?" I mean, the value risk, what's the value in getting it done? What's risk if you don't? Those questions are actually, you can answer those with strong conviction because you know what your areas of focus are. If you're not clear about your areas of focus, that's the place to start if you want to get clear about priorities because if you don't know what your roles are, what you're being measured by, come review time, what you're getting paid to do, are you meeting the objectives personally and professionally? Are you giving time to the stuff you want to give time to? It really does. I like you call it a bridge level. It's kind of the toll booth between going up and going down. It's like everything's got to go through there kind of as a quality check. Are you really, does this belong on your list? And it, for me, it's the strongest way that I can stand in a neutral no. And a neutral no is different than a heated emotional no. Don't you realize how much I have on my plate? It's different than, oh, you know what? I'm so sorry, that's not my, it's not one of my roles. We call them roles at the company. That's why I say that so much. It's not one of my roles. It's not one of my areas of focus. I can try to help you find whose role that is, or help you get clarity to make sure it's somebody's role. But that's what in our company is really, really clear for us about these areas of focus is just in being able to say no. Everybody knows what their roles are. So in terms of reviewing these, I review them, I'd say about monthly, probably longer than that generally for me. But this morning, I didn't have it as a trigger. I just happened to go, huh, I'm going to scan my areas of focus. It's just, it's one of those that just popped up. It was time to review them. And as I mentioned, to cross check them against my projects list. I think I'd actually was looking at my projects list to realize, oh, there's this big project I'm working on. The team doesn't know about it. And then I realized, well, how would they know about it? What role do I hold that I'm doing that project? So look for those opportunities. If you find you're like, oh, what project should I be working on? Maybe it's time for a good area of focus review. And it took me, what I'm describing took me 10 minutes. I didn't sit back, light candles, call David Allen saying, I'm going to review, I just 10 minutes and boom, it was done. And I went, oh, all right, good. I feel better now. I've got this covered. I'm good. It's on cruise control. Um, let's pop over here to the maintaining, reflecting, executing. So maintaining would look like cleaning up your areas of focus. Are they current? Reflecting for me can look like stepping back. Am I working on the right projects around my areas of focus? And going higher level, which we're about to do, are my higher horizons of focus mapped correctly to my areas of focus? And anything to execute on. So what I specifically looked for this morning was there any role or area of focus that I hold that I'm not energizing in any way? So the energizing being there's no project, there's no next action. Are they flat? Yeah, that one I realized I could be doing more for, and I created a next action that I could execute on. So any gaps or next actions for you around the reviewing of your areas of focus, capture that and share that if you can in the questions box. Larea is saying one key area of focus to designate is a place to keep the list once you make it so you know where it is and can get to it without searching. It's actually it's funny, it's a very good point, Larea. This morning I realized it's in our database, our company database that all of our areas of focus are tracked. And I look at it there and I went, but it's not in my own system currently. It's not in Lotus Notes. Do I want it? And I went, you know what? I'm okay that it's not. It sounds weird, but I just went, I'm okay that I have to go to another place for it, but I know where that other place is. A lot of people keep their areas of focus list right where their other lists are. Where do you keep yours, Meg?
I keep mine in my current system, and I can't tell you how many coaching experiences I've had where we created it, and they forget about it. And so I have to say that for the vast majority of my coaching, the actions and projects and areas of focus are pretty much there together.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say when I've coached people, probably the notes section or right within at times I've had mine right within where my projects list, action lists, all that.
Yeah.
I have it
Yeah,
as a
mine's
list
right next
there.
to
Yeah.
mine. I use OneNote, and I have a tab for areas of focus, and I have a tab for projects, and then I have a tab for next action, so they're all right there.
That's funny. I don't know why I don't have it. There you go. Everybody's different, a little different. All right. Andrea's saying often look at these only when changing jobs or wanting to, or major roles in it, or at performance review time. Ugh, another action to review. Well, hopefully it's a positive thing too. I mean, really, if you look and go, what's the value? That'd be another thing to get clear about. What's the value in looking at your areas of focus? For me, I know what to say no to. I know what I should be working on. I know what to say yes in a positive way. I know what to say no to as well. All right, let's go to the 1 and 2 year goals and objectives. Kind of what are you aiming toward? What are the longer term things? Some of these may be related to your projects. They may not be. You might have a current project. Let's say your current project is pay off debt, but your 1 to 2 year goal is to buy a new house. You might have it mapped that way. Don't look for too many of those mappings in a forced way throughout your horizons of focus. But what would you say, Meg, looks like in terms of maintaining, reflecting, and executing on 1 to 2 year goals and objectives?
Yeah, I find that for most people, maintaining it is really quarterly reviews. Sometimes there may be annual for recalibrations, but generally speaking, quarterly. Now, again, sometimes I feel like I repeat myself. I live in Maine, and I think in terms of seasons. There are four very distinct seasons up here.
No, they're not, Meg.
And
There are two. It's summer
there
for 2 weeks and winter. You had your winter coat on a webinar 2 weeks
I
ago.
did.
There is summer and winter.
It did. It was like so cold and stormy, and now it's like 95 degrees. That's very true. But I still look at it in terms of four seasons. And so I actually do a quarterly review, September 21st, December 21st, March 21st, and June 21st. That's how I think. Now, some people will do it on your fiscal quarter 1, 2, 3, 4. So I think that I just invite people to think about, well, how often do you need to look at those goals 1 to 2 years out? Now, some people may say, I don't have any. That's okay. When I first joined the David Allen Company, I actually was living my goals and vision. I had a new job, I had a new baby, I had a house, I was, a year into my marriage. All those goals and visions were actually happening, and I had no goals and vision. I really judged myself, where I thought, why? David's talking about goals and vision and purpose. I mean, I had purpose, but I had no goals and vision for years because I was living them. I couldn't even, look to the future. Yes, I could for my job, but personally I couldn't even look to the future. So I had no goals for a while. And I remember David saying, look, if you don't have any attention on that level, don't just kind of make something up. Just kind of, only have it if you have any attention. The beauty of having the goals list is that it doesn't freak yourself out, because one of the things I see is people put goals on their project lists. So I had a client that worked for a pharmaceutical company, and there were things that he was working on that wasn't going to come to fruition for 3, 5, 7 years, and yet he had it on his project list. So just kind of be clear that projects are anything you're going to complete within a couple of weeks to a couple of months to a year, and goals are kind of 1 to 2 years out.
Yeah. And I'm one that I don't have a ton of goals. I probably look at them about annually, so I'm not in the quarterly camp. Mine's much more about kind of an annual review. I tend to do it with my husband. This and the next level of 3 to 5 years, we tend to do annually, or unless there's some kind of itchy, scratchy tension to go, oh, should we take this vacation? I don't know. Let's look at our financial goals. We might look at it on an ad hoc basis, but generally about once a year or so for me. So just kind of throw it in the other direction. I'm looking at maintaining, are they current? Reflecting, do I have the goals I want to have? So one of my big goals is I'm in a photography program I want to graduate. So that's one of my goals, and I'm reflecting that. It took reflecting back to say, wow, I'd like to have something more a personal goal to focus on, and that became one of my goals for that reason from a reflecting time. And the executing looked like, how do I find a good photography school? So capture certainly any gaps or next actions on that one. You may find there's some similarities to the next level we're going to go to. So let's pop over there, which is your 3 to 5 year vision and strategy, kind of your longer term horizon, your longer term focus. People have often asked, I don't know if you've heard this, Meg, but people say, why did David Allen stop at 5 years? Because the one right after this is your life purpose. You jump from 5 years to life purpose. It's not, you could actually put a 3 to 5 plus right there on this. David Allen said most people, they realistically don't know beyond 5 years. If you do, fantastic, grab it. Consider this 3+ years or create your own timeline here. But that's why, as David said, most people, they'd just be making stuff up. There's really not you don't kind of know beyond the 5 years. But if you have a 10 year, you might have kids that are going to be in college by then, or you're going to be the CEO by then, or you're going to have bought the lake house by then, or whatever that is. Certainly grab that. So for mine, in terms of maintaining, it's about once a year on this level. Um, Meg, what would you capture around
Yeah,
the
I would absolutely agree about yearly. And again, as often as you need to. I actually have some clients that have a tendency to review the higher levels more frequently. So these are just recommendations. Remember, so much about getting things done are recommendations and best practices and not rules and rigidity. Um, and and again, if you have any attention on it, for those of you who know me, I now have a daughter who's 14, and she's going to be done with high school in 3 years. So for the first time, kind of like a couple of months ago, I actually started thinking about the 40,000 vision level. Before that, I didn't really think past, just having my daughter in high school. Now all of a sudden I'm starting to, it's just happening organically about, geez, what might I like to be focusing on or doing when the little one's out of the nest? Well, she's not so little anymore. But so again, if you don't have anything on this level, no worries. If you do, then you might have an opportunity of grabbing some next actions.
hmm Yeah, and consider your areas of focus. If you're not quite sure what to even capture at this level, you might sit in front of your areas of focus and say what comes to mind here. So if my area of focus, personal area of focus, is financial freedom, that for me and my husband triggered our retirement discussion and retirement goals and financial goals, which actually trickled down and really affected what kind of vacation we're going to take, and should we pay off the car this year, that kind of stuff. So that if you're not quite sure, well, what do I want to do? What are my big blue sky ideas? See if your areas of focus help you in this. So maybe there's a next action to review your areas of focus to help you capture what's there, not to create it out of, where GTD is not about go create goals for yourself. It's capturing what you have your attention on, that it's already there. And then the final level here around life purpose and core values. And before we move on to that, I just want to read Siobhan's comment. I love this, Siobhan. If you don't know Siobhan, she's just a fabulous black belt GTDer, and recently did an interview with her. You have to listen to it. She said, when I reviewed my areas of focus, I realized I loved my job. So really good stuff comes out of the reviews. So, in terms of life purpose and core values, Meg, what does that mean, and how often do you really need to be reviewing your life purpose? If you nail it once, do you need to keep reviewing it?
I think so. I think it warrants about at least once a year. I think a lot of people kind of intuitively do that in January, frankly. I think it's not about resolutions per se, but it's really about, again, just like you said, what am I here for? What are my standards and values? And sometimes, our core values, we don't really realize them until they're violated. And then we're like, wow, that's a core value that I have, or you have as shared as a family or an organization. And I've worked with a lot of people on this in coaching, and I find that some people may have one or two sentences, and some people actually have written, some paragraphs about what they feel like they're here for. If they fast forward and they say, did I accomplish what I needed to in this lifetime? It's just something, again, if you have attention on this, if it's something that means something to you that you want to spend some time on, and if you don't, then there's no worries with that either. There are no have-tos here.
Yeah, I think what I do with mine, I probably nailed mine down a few years ago, but I wordsmith it. Just so that I don't go numb to it either, I find a different way to say it. I mean, there was an interesting comment from David in the video I just posted about his tickler file system, where he has an affirmational, it's a little card, and he drew it, and there's some beautiful lettering and designs on it, and he puts it in his tickler file to be periodically reminded of it. And he said, if you put that kind of thing up where you see it all the time, you'll go numb to it. So he randomly puts it in his tickler file system so that he can be surprised by it. And it's an affirmational kind of life purpose statement. And that's actually kind of a fun way to do it. So I kind of stumble on mine sometimes. I'll be scanning through my I put mine in Evernote and I'll scan through it and I'll go, oh yeah, that one's really nice, you know. So it's, and I'll wordsmith it a little bit. Is there a better way I can say it? Is there a more engaging way I can describe that life purpose? But you might find you have changes to it, and you might find you don't. So anything for you around that level, around reviewing gaps and next actions. And I do want to just respond to Brian's comment about making stuff up isn't always bad. Sometimes make it up, make it happen can be a helpful spur. Absolutely, Brian. I mean, what I mean by the comment of don't just create stuff on your goals is what we don't want people to think is you have to have the things at that level. For me, getting more into photography as a hobby was really something I created because I put it out there. I defined it, and I always did it, kind of on the side, but not as a defined thing. So absolutely, I captured it, and all of a sudden things just lined up, and here I am in a photography program. So I totally believe in the make it up, make it happen. I just wanted to make sure people don't feel like, oh, I really need to flesh all this out and figure out what my 3 to 5 year goals are and that kind of stuff. But it can be a very, very creative tool as well if you can use it that way. So let's see if anybody has any comments or questions. Kristen is saying, thank you. Love the images in this presentation. Will be helpful triggers to enjoy the weekly review, guided by uplifting images. Fantastic. And then Eric is saying, at 40 to 50,000 feet, I found these questions are really useful. What do I want to have? What do I want to do? Or who or how do I want to be? Those are fantastic, Eric. Thank you for sharing those. So what do I want to have? What do I want to do? Who do I want to be? Well, we have come to our time. We did manage to fill the time. I should have remembered that Meg and I love to talk, so I'll never say again that we might end early. So thank you all for being on the line. And Meg, thank you for all the great insight. I love your coaching stories. I always learn stuff from you. So thanks, everybody. If you want to chat further about this, you can certainly pop that in the forum. I would love to be on further discussions on this, and I'm sure so would Meg. And also, you can always reach us personally and privately at webinars@davidco.com. So thank you all.
Kelly. And thanks, everybody. Just so appreciate what everybody put in the question box. Very lively and rich.
Yeah, it was really great. Thanks for the awesome participation, and we'll see you all on the next one.